Lochani, Sanbonani, Afsheni, Program Director Peter Ndoro, Minister in the Presidency, Honorable Jeff Hadebe, Acting Director General, Mr. Ndima, Chairperson of Luthuli Museum Council, Mr. Sithole, Deputy Chairperson, Mr. Reli Fane, Luthuli Museum Director, Mr. Klaba, Dr. Wali Sirote, Luthuli family, UKZN leadership, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and privilege for me to have been chosen to deliver the 2016 Chief Albert Luthuli Annual Memorial Lecture, a momentous event in the South African calendar. It is for me a daunting task because by agreeing to speak here, I was effectively consenting to walking in the giant footsteps of revered luminaries who have been to this podium for the past 11 years to deliver this lecture. These include the inaugural one by former President Thabo Mbeki and others by former Zambian President Kenneth Kaunda, former Mozambican President Chisano, President Jacob Zuma, former Chief Justice Sandile Ngcobo, former Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Frini Jinwala, and former IEC Chairperson, Dr. Brigalia Bam. I would like to thank the Luthuli Museum Council, in particular the Chairperson, Mr. Sithole, for extending the invite to my office, enabling us not only to take part in this lecture, but to lead in the conversation. My office and I are truly grateful for the opportunity. On keeping the legacy of Chief Albert Luthuli, yesterday I was having even teary eyes seeing the Chief Albert Luthuli Primary School. They are all the way from Davidton. During the dinner which was organized, they showed us what is the legacy which Chief Albert Luthuli left for us. First, I would like to commend the Council, the Department of Arts and Culture, which I'm informed is on its 12th year. It is an initiative like this that ensures that the legacy of our struggle icons is kept alive. The preservation of this legacy is critical in that generations to come will get to appreciate the sacrifices that were made by stalwarts like Chief Albert Luthuli for us to enjoy the freedom that some take for granted today. I further wish to congratulate the Luthuli Museum Council for focusing this initiative of such an opposite subject matter, a question on whether the South African Constitution is an impediment or a deal breaker in ensuring the nation building and social cohesion for a country with our kind of history. This is indeed a pertinent question when one takes into account the kind of issues that South Africa grapples with today. We have been observing growing calls for the economic emancipation of the black majority and the resolution of the land question. We have also seen the manifestation of untold racial tensions. These are issues that have for a considerable while been bubbling under the surface, and it was only inevitable that they would at some point erupt into the open, forcing society to confront them heads on. Chief Albert Luthuli spent a big part of his life fighting for the political and economic emancipation of the African majority in this country. He fought against the land dispossession and frowned upon discrimination on the basis of color of one's skin. He dreamed of a democratic South Africa where there would be equal opportunities for everyone, where everyone would enjoy the same human rights, where would all have equal access to land, and where would all be entitled to a dignified quality of life, irrespective of the shade of skin or pigmentation. His sentiments in this regard are captured in the famous speech he made in 1952, shortly after he was sacked as the chief of his ancestral rural village of Grootville Reserve in KwaZulu-Natal, following his refusal to choose between his role then as the leader of the ANC and his chieftaincy duties. In that speech, which is popularly referred to as the Road to Freedom is via the Cross speech, where he said, "I have embraced the non-violent passive resistance technique in fighting for freedom, because I'm convinced it is the only non-revolutionary, legitimate and human way that could be used by people denied, as we are, effective constitutional means to further aspirations. The wisdom or foolishness of this decision I place in the hands of the Almighty. What the future has in store for me, I do not know. It might be ridicule, imprisonment, concentration camps, flogging, banishment, and even death. I pray to the Almighty to strengthen my resolve so that none of these great possibilities may deter me from striving for the Union of South Africa, to make it a true democracy and a true union in form and in spirit of all communities of the land." Our Constitution, I will discuss in detail later on in my presentation, encapsulate all and more of these ideals that Chief Luthuli stood for so defiantly, even in the face of deprivation of the perks and privileges that came with being a chief. Chief Albert Luthuli, a brief profile with emphasis on issues of social cohesion. Who was Chief Albert Luthuli? As the Luthuli Museum, you are surely, and everyone know more about the man than I do. However, at the risk of preaching to the choir, I will highlight a few notable aspects of his life. In fact, again, yesterday, the school children showed another element which I've learned so much from them, showing in their artistic way the life of Chief Albert Luthuli. Chief Albert John Mvumbi Luthuli is the best remembered by many of us, especially the younger folk, as the man after whom the headquarters of the ANC on Sawa Street, the heart of Johannesburg, is named. As far back, Chief Luthuli's peaceful anti-apartheid message had already echoed across the globe, reaching places as far afield as Scandinavia and prompting the Nobel Peace Prize Committee in Norway to sit up and take notice of him. Soon thereafter, Chief Luthuli became the first Black African recipient of the treasured Nobel Peace Prize for his commitment to the peaceful struggle. At the time when the award was conferred on him, he had been placed under house arrest by the government of the day. What I love about Chief Albert Luthuli, being a very cultured woman, is that he went to that function dressed in his traditional Zulu attire. This showed that he knew who he is, he knew his culture, he knew his language. Therefore, that goes a long way for ensuring a self-esteem of a person, if you know yourself, to accept that particular prize. He was also the chief of the Abase Makolweni tribe in Grootville until his dismissal. He also believed in sports, which is one of the vehicles which we need to be utilizing to bring people together. I think the same strategy with our former President Nelson Mandela used. One can't help but wonder how Chief Luthuli would have reacted to the progress that we began registering in the early 1990s under the leadership of his successor, O.R. Tambo, leading to the groundbreaking moment of 1994, when we attained freedom and ushered in the new democratic order that he fought for. The Constitution, a great piece of work. It has been mentioned that the Constitution will be celebrating 20 years this year. This brings me to the focus of my input today. Is the Constitution an obstacle or catalyst in fostering nation building and social cohesion in a historically divided society? It is often said that we, the South Africans, have one of the best and most progressive constitutions in the world. Is it true? Even the world's most mature democracies get green with envy when they look at our supreme law. This much became clear 4 years ago in the aftermath of the Arab Spring, when Egypt was preparing to write a new constitution to chart a course to a new democratic order. Around about the same time, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the USA happened to be visiting Egypt. It appears Egyptians were looking at the American Constitution to model their own. But then she said the following: I would not look to the US Constitution if I were you. I would be looking at the South African Constitution. This was a deliberate attempt to have a fundamental instrument of government that embraced basic human rights and independent judiciary. It really, I think, a great piece of work that was done. There is no doubt in my mind that the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa and those who came before our leadership and our struggle icon could not have bequeathed to us a more precious inheritance. As South Africans, we should be thankful for this visionary leadership that led to the process of putting together the Constitution. The leadership collective that assigned the Constitutional Assembly the responsibility to carve the content of the Constitution into a fine document that is today had the foresight that allowed them to anticipate and prepare for the kind of challenges that any new democracy birth out of near civil war situation would run into. They built into the Constitution people's entitlements, the Bill of Rights, which added to that is a makeup and role of the state, seeing to it that people get what they are entitled to. The role of those we elect in public office is clearly spelled out. The President is given a role to uphold the Constitution as the supreme law of the country, as said by the Constitutional Court judgment by C.J. Mkhwebane, where he said, the President is the constitutional being by design and commander-in-chief of state affairs. And the National Assembly is the voice of all South Africans, poor, voiceless, and the watchdog of state resources. The National Assembly holds the executive accountable for the fulfillment of the promises they have made to the nation. The Chapter 9 institutions, like the Public Protector, assist in strengthening that constitutional democracy. In addition, the drafters of this Constitution happened to also append checks and balances that will empower the people to hold to account those they have elected to public office. This is why 20 years later, our democracy continues to function a well-oiled machine. We also boast highly respected and competent constitutional institutions that include the South African Human Rights Commission, the Public Protector, the Auditor General, and the IEC that continue and strengthen our constitutional democracy. Efforts to improve the quality of life of our people, with millions of families being provided with housing, electricity, and water since 1994. What can we take away from this Constitution as the Office of the Public Protector, but as a nation? Program Director, I would like to take this opportunity to talk about the Office of the Public Protector as an institution, along with other independent state institutions, but focusing on the Office of the Public Protector, which is established in terms of this very same Constitution. Section 182 of the Constitution enjoins the Public Protector to investigate any conduct in state affairs that is alleged or suspected to be improper or result in any impropriety, prejudice, and report on that conduct and take appropriate action. Public Protector is pivotal to the facilitation of good governance in our constitutional dispensation. It's also an independent institution subject only to the law and exercising its powers without any fear or favor. This gives us a broad mandate which has been interpreted an oversight over service failure and conduct failure in all state affairs, and it also includes investigating state-owned institutions. In addition, the Constitution also instructs the Public Protector to be accessible to all persons and communities. There are various other laws which are additional or giving additional power to the power protector, where the power protector can investigate, can conciliate, can mediate, can even negotiate in resolving disputes. I think this is one element which is not utilized much, but then issues of service delivery protest can be conciliated at that early stage before we have a lot of damages. Issues like fees must fall protests can be conciliated and mediated at that particular early stage without causing any further damage. We have the sole power to investigate and report on violations of the Executive Ethics Code under the relevant act. As well, we have shared powers to investigate corruption activities under the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. Also, we are a safe haven for the under the Protected Disclosure Act, and we also reviewed decision of the National Builders Registration Council. I would go on and on about the power protector, but I would also want to mention further the quotation by Chief Justice Mkhwebane, where he said the power protector is that one of the most valuable constitutional gifts to our nation in the fight against corruption, unlawful enrichment, prejudice, impropriety in state affairs for the betterment of good governance. The tentacles of poverty runs far, wide and deep in our nation. And we know that litigation is very expensive for our people. They cannot afford. So the office is the only place they can be utilizing. This institution has assisted a lot of complainants, including poor service delivery relating to housing, electricity, water, social grants, pension, UIF, workers' compensation, identity documents, birth certificates, to name but a few. There were also cases of conduct failure, matters such as corruption, fraud, abuse of power, and resources. Those are the cases which we are dealing with as an organization. Our focus will also be more on the grassroots levels and people in the remote areas who are experiencing the triple challenges of which we are facing as a country. Not yet utopia, still a long way to go. This seemingly flawless framework and the related achievement are not meant to suggest that we live in a perfect setting. Many of our people are left behind. We are grappling with the widening gap between the rich and the poor as inequalities continue to deepen. We face student uprisings over tertiary education fees. Unemployment is spiraling out of control. I think we've seen now it's at 27%. And I was discussing with my daughter where she was saying, but mommy, why government is in power? Why can't you use political power as government to redress the imbalances of the power of the past to make sure that people also have the economic power? Regarding social cohesion, racial tensions have hit a new high. Many of us are still shocked following the so-called coffin assault case in this day and age, which happened in Mpumalanga, as we were forgetting the Penny Sparrow and others cases. The race problems have always been there. However, in the last few months, we've seen a surge. But the problem of racism has been more complex than the blatant forms of discrimination that have formed part of a trending topics in our social discourse. A ray of light and a hope for the future. This notwithstanding, I wish to argue that our Constitution, which is a living document, remain the only guiding light that can deliver us to the proverbial promised land. As I draw towards my conclusion, I wish to make a few proposals in response to the important questions which have been given to us by the Council. How do we get the nation to understand and internalize the Constitution to a point where they believe in it and becomes part of their everyday life experience? There are no easy answers to these questions, but I am hopeful that my contribution will spark a conversation that will lead to the solutions. Firstly, let us look to Chief Albert Luthuli. Earlier I mentioned that he was a preacher and a teacher. Therein lies your answer. I mean, yesterday we saw a very servant leadership in teacher Lungile and the principal of the school. Again, I'm still repeating. Minister Khatebe, we were mentioning that I think in the celebration of our 20th Constitution celebration next week, mid-December, these kids are a force to be reckoned with. They live or they believe in what the Constitution is. I think if we start at that young age, we can go a long way. And if we can have teachers like Abo Lungile and principals like Abo Mr. Manana, as a country we can go a long way. Again, learning from Chief Albert Luthuli. Preachers spend their entire lives encouraging and persuading us not only to read but also to study the Bible. They also teach us the scriptures. Why can't we use the same preachers and teachers to teach us the Constitution so that we can live this particular document? I think, again, we've lost touch of not utilizing a lot of our chieftaincy and of our traditional leaders because they have a lot of influence in our local societies. Accordingly, we should encourage and persuade our people to study and understand and internalize the Constitution. I know that the Department of Justice prints in all 11 official languages distribute the Constitution. I believe that if every single one of us can own a copy in the language we are comfortable with and spend time studying the document, we'd have an empowered nation. We speak of an active citizenry. We cannot have a citizenry if the citizens are not informed of their entitlements. The responsibility of the state in the manner in which the state ought to conduct itself and the available avenues to employ in holding the state accountable. I know that our basic education school curriculum covers in a subject like life orientation, things such as human rights and so forth. Is that enough? I believe more should be done to inculcate constitutional studies in our curriculum, especially at a very young age. Again, going back to what I've seen yesterday, at a very young age, kids being taught the Constitution, the South African history, and narrating it as if they are just speaking in their own language. So sports can also be can play a major role. We've seen it work when South Africa received independence. As a developmental state, is the Constitution better placed to address these challenges? Our Constitution is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. There are legislations which have been created, and we wonder, have these laws yielded the desired results? Yes and no, in the sense that there's few who are still benefiting in being economically empowered. A full and proper implementation of these laws can go a long distance. Some of the strategies which can be used is to promote income-generating strategies by integrating social protection into economic livelihood. We have a lot of informal businesses, which I wonder whether do we consider them into empowering or into contributing to our GDP. Set aside from government purchases are good programs which have been done, and we can utilize women and youth cooperatives in school feeding schemes, school uniforms in our local communities, and empower that particular community. That will eradicate unemployment. Promote vocational training for unemployed, economically active youth. We can learn a lot of lessons like from countries like China, where you don't need to be having a degree or anything, but as long as you are vocationally trained, you can use your skills, you can be a youth, and you can be an employer instead of studying to want to be employed. So those are the issues we can address. Leveraging stockpiles and self-help groups, we need to capitalize more on that. How have we fared in the social cohesion? On nation building, it appears little effort has been made by government and as an active agent of state to make it compulsory to internalize the South African history. Patriotism through respect of the flag by the citizenry is one of the issues which we can look into. This could be achieved through starting it into public institutions or buildings where we can know our flag and respect our flag. On social cohesion, some racial groups in our midst appear to be making little or no effort to speak at least one indigenous language. Life goes on as usual, therefore creating a gap in social cohesion. However, logic dictates that if genuine reconciliation is to happen, we ought to meet each other halfway. Unfortunately, all this suggests that we are still not united in our diversity. South Africa has no common culture. This glares when we commemorate national holidays where participation by some is minimal or there's no effort to be actively participating. As President Mandela once said, if you speak to a person in their own language, you speak to their heart. So if we can learn more of our African languages and speak to each other in that, we can come closer to building social cohesion as a country. Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, we have a beautiful country whose democracy is based on a constitution that is an envy to the world. Yes, we have experienced and we continue to battle with one challenge after the other, but who said it will be easy? We come from a history of overcoming obstacles. Let us draw from our experiences to negotiate the hurdles that continue to sprout before as we march to the promised land. We shall overcome. Once again, let me thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. On your behalf, I'd just like to thank the new Public Protector, Advocate Mkhwebane. Thank you so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us. It is a huge subject, and it's quite clear that we're not going to be able to solve it today, but we certainly can start having this conversation because we certainly need to move forward. The advocate spoke about the role of the Public Protector, and it's clear from there that it's a huge responsibility. And in protecting the public, one of the weapons in her arsenal is actually the Constitution itself. And she said that it's, look, it's not a means to an end. It's not it's not an end in itself, but it isn't a means to an end, part of the solution. And she offered some help as well in terms of social cohesion. Maybe we need to learn each other's languages, spend more time learning each other's cultures, make a sincere effort. As President Mandela said, you know, if you speak to somebody in his language, you speak to his heart. Maybe this is an issue of the heart more than it is about legal premise. Anyway, let's continue and hear from our final speaker now before we get into this conversation. And